The rain bled neon across Koreatown streets, and Sarah Chun was already 3 steps past him when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the symphony of car horns and karaoke spilling from basement bars. A child crying. Not the bratty wail of a tired toddler, but something raw. Terrified, she stopped, her exhausted body protesting after a double shift, and turned. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. Standing frozen on the corner in a navy designer suit that screamed money. His hands pressed tight over his ears. His whole body rocking as tears carved paths down his face. The crowd, dozens of people, flowed around him like water around a stone, eyes sliding past, as if a traumatized child was just another Tuesday night inconvenience in Manhattan. New York at its finest. See something, ignore something, keep walking. But Sarah had never been good at minding her own business. Hey, sweetie. She knelt a respectful distance away, careful not to crowd him, her voice soft. Are you lost? The boy didn't respond. His eyes stayed squeezed shut, his small chest heaving with each shuddering breath. She tried Chinese next. She'd picked up enough working in Koreatown to manage basic phrases, but got nothing. His rocking intensified, his distress climbing like a siren. Then Sarah noticed it. The label inside his collar visible when his jacket shifted. Kingyu, Korean characters. Her mind flickered back. Seoul, the special needs school where she'd volunteered. The late night studying Hangul by the light of convenience store signs. The way certain sounds, certain rhythms could cut through the noise of panic. She switched languages. Her voice dropping into the gentle melodic cadence she'd learned worked best with overwhelmed children. Quintana Ando. It's okay. You're safe. The boy's eyes snapped open. Sumaja Chanchani. Let's breathe slowly. Sarah demonstrated her hands moving in the calming pattern she'd practiced 100 times in another life. Narangadi Hana T set together with me. She watched his small chest stutter, then sink with hers. His hands slowly lowered from his ears. The terror in his dark eyes shifted. Not gone, but less. Ijuno, he whispered, his voice barely cutting through the rain. I'm Jahun. Anyang Juna. Sarah felt something loosen in her own chest. Nan and Sarah yo. Hello, Jahun. I'm Sarah. She didn't see the black SUVs until they were already there. Didn't notice the men in tailored suits moving through the crowd with military precision until a shadow fell across them both. A presence so heavy it made the air feel thick. Sarah looked up. The man standing above them seemed to pull darkness around him like a cloak. Sharp, brutal features, ink crawling up his neck from beneath an expensive collar. And eyes. God, those eyes that assessed her with the cold calculation of someone who made life or death decisions before most people had their morning coffee. Behind him, for more men formed a wall of expensive fabric and barely concealed violence. A woman's voice cracked through the tension. Frantic, desperate, she pushed through the wall of security, tears streaming down her face. But Jahun didn't run to her. He looked at Sarah, uncertainty flickering in his small face. Sarah asked gently, Is that your aunt? Jahun nodded, and only then did he move, though he glanced back at Sarah twice as the woman, his aunt, gathered him into her arms. The man with the dangerous eyes hadn't moved. He studied Sarah with an intensity that made her skin prickle, his gaze cataloging everything from her worn sneakers to the name tag she'd forgotten to remove from her stained uniform. The silence stretched. Rain drummed against expensive car roofs. You speak Korean. His voice was smoke over gravel, his English perfect but accented. Where did you learn? Sarah stood slowly, suddenly aware she was surrounded, but refusing to show the fear threading through her veins. I taught English there for a year. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness, never softness, but a recalibration. He glanced at Jahun, who was still watching Sarah even as his aunt held him. Then back at her, Park Dae-hoon. He didn't offer his hand. It was a statement, not an introduction. He expected her to know the name. She didn't, but she nodded anyway. You calmed him. Not a question. There was something beneath the words. Disbelief, maybe. Wonder even. No one outside family has been able to do that since. He cut himself off, his jaw tightening. Then, what's your name? Sarah. Chun. Dae-hoon pulled out his phone, typed something with quick, precise movements, then looked at one of his men. His voice dropped, but she heard it clearly. A command that made her blood run cold. Find everything about her. Where she lives, where she works, who she knows, everything. His eyes returned to Sarah, and for the first time since she'd knelt beside that crying child, she felt genuine bone-deep fear. "We'll be in touch, Miss Chin." Then they were gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night as quickly as they'd materialized, leaving Sarah standing alone on the corner, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stood there for a long moment, rain soaking through her jacket. What the hell did I just walk into? Sarah made it back to her studio apartment in Queens on autopilot, her mind replaying the encounter on an endless loop. Those eyes, that command, find everything about her. She should have felt good about helping a lost child. She should have gone to bed satisfied that she'd done the right thing. Instead, she triple-checked her locks and Googled Park Dae-hoon, New York. The results made her stomach drop. Thank you for watching, my loves. If this chapter pulled you into the shadows with me, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts below. Every comment helps this story reach the people who need it. Rest your heart for now because the next part goes even deeper. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The address Dae-hoon had sent led to a building in Midtown that looked like it could swallow entire fortunes without a trace. Sarah stood on the sidewalk for 3 full minutes, her reflection warping in the gleaming glass facade before she forced herself through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and cold light. A security guard with an earpiece waved her toward a private elevator without asking her name. They already knew she was coming. The ride to the top floor felt like ascending into thinner air. Her ears popped, her pulse hammered against her throat. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse office where the city noise had been surgically removed, replaced by a silence so complete it felt oppressive, engineered, controlled. The space was vast and minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that made her feel small, insignificant. And there, silhouetted against all that gray light, stood Park Dae-hoon behind a desk the size of her entire apartment. He didn't stand, didn't acknowledge her entrance, just watched her walk toward him across what felt like a mile of polished concrete floor, her worn sneakers squeaking softly with each step. Sarah's mouth was dry. She could feel his eyes tracking her movement, cataloging every nervous gesture, every tell. She stopped a few feet from the desk, close enough to see the manila folder sitting in its center, far enough to maintain some illusion of safety. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. She sat. Dae-hoon leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The light behind him made it impossible to read his expression. Jaehoon's mother was my sister. 2 years ago, she was murdered in front of him. A bullet meant for me found her instead. The words were clinical, sharp, stripped of everything human. He was 4 years old. He watched her die. Dae-hoon's tone didn't waver. Before that night, he was verbal, social, a bright, happy child who loved to paint and ask questions about everything. After a pause, the first crack in his composure, he stopped speaking to anyone outside immediate family. His therapists call it selective mutism triggered by severe trauma. He has sensory sensitivities, panic attacks, night terrors. He trusts no one. Sarah's chest ached. She thought of that little boy rocking on the corner, hands over his ears, drowning in a sea of indifferent strangers. Until you. Dae-hoon's eyes fixed on her now, sharp and assessing. You spoke to him for 3 minutes, and he responded. He laughed. He took your hand. That hasn't happened in 2 years, Miss Chun. He reached forward and opened the folder. Sarah's stomach dropped. It was her life. Dissected, laid bare. Her undergraduate transcript from Portland State. Her teaching certification from the Soul program. Copies of her apartment lease, her credit card statements, her mother's death certificate, her student loan balance, $62,000, highlighted in yellow, her mother's medical debt that she'd inherited, $34,000, circled in red. You worked 2 jobs to put yourself through college. Dae-hoon's voice was neutral, reciting facts. You majored in linguistics with a focus on Korean language and culture. After graduation, you taught English in Seoul for 14 months and volunteered at a special needs school on weekends. You returned to New York when your mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She died 6 months later. You've been working double shifts at a Korean fusion restaurant in Koreatown for the past year, barely making rent. Each word was a violation, a scalpel cutting into her privacy. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. Her face felt hot. You had no right. I have every right. He closed the folder. The moment you touched my nephew, You became a person of interest. I protect what's mine, Miss Chun. That requires information. I'm not yours. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Or recognition of a challenge. Not yet. He slid a document across the desk. I'm offering you a position as Jehun's private caregiver and cultural educator. $30,000 per month, health insurance included, all taxes paid, completely legal employment. The number made her dizzy. She made $28,000 a year at the restaurant, before taxes. This was more money than she'd ever seen. But the man offering it had darkness swimming in his eyes and blood on his hands. I can't. You can. He settled back in his chair, supremely confident. You need the money. Jehun needs someone who understands him. Everyone wins. What exactly do you do? Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. I solve problems. That's deliberately vague. Some problems require delicacy. Others require force. He was utterly matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. I use whatever tools are necessary to protect what I value. The silence stretched. Sarah stared at the contract, the numbers swimming on the page. Her student loans, her mother's medical debt, the constant stress of choosing between groceries and rent. All of it could disappear. But she'd be working for a man who spoke about violence like it was a business strategy, who looked at her like she was already his. There are rules. His voice cut through her internal debate. You live in the townhouse. You're available 24/7. You don't leave without security. You don't discuss our arrangement with anyone. You become part of this family, which means you're under my protection, also under my control. You're honest about the cage you're building. That's refreshing. Most people dress it up as opportunity. Daehun's smile was sharp. I don't lie, Miss Chun. Lies are inefficient. You'll have a beautiful cage, comfortable and safe, but still a cage. The question is whether you're brave enough to step inside. Sarah thought about her empty refrigerator, the eviction notice tucked behind her utility bills, the way she'd felt when Jehun finally smiled. 3 signatures. That's all it would take. 3 signatures, and she'd disappear into his world completely. She picked up the pen. The first signature was her name. The second was her agreement to the terms. The third was her consent to a background check that would make her earlier violation of privacy look gentle. When she finished, Daehun took the contract and slipped it into a drawer. Welcome to the family, Miss Chun. And Sarah Chun, who had spent her entire adult life fighting to stay afloat, finally stopped swimming and let the current carry her into the dark. The townhouse was a monument to controlled elegance. Sarah followed Marcus, Daehun's lieutenant, through rooms that felt more like museum exhibits than living spaces. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and somehow sterile, until they reached the 3rd floor. This is Jehun's wing. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. We've tried everything. Therapists, specialists. He tolerates them, but doesn't respond. Sarah studied the room. The bed was made military tight. The toys were organized by size and color. Everything was perfect. Sterile. Where is he now? Downstairs in the den. His expression flickered. Worry maybe. Or resignation. He's been anxious since Daehun told him you were coming. He remembers you. Something warm and painful bloomed in Sarah's chest. They found him in a room off the kitchen, sitting on the floor with a pile of wooden blocks untouched beside him. He was rocking slightly, his hands pressed together, his dark eyes fixed on nothing. Sarah knelt a few feet away. Hello, Jehun. His rocking stopped. His eyes found hers. Nakiak, do you remember me? She kept her voice soft, musical. Podar, the rainy day? A flicker of recognition, his hands unclenched. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out the drawing she'd made. Stick figures of a woman and a boy, breathing together, numbered 1, 2, 3 in Korean. She'd drawn it on her lunch break using crayons she'd bought at a drugstore. Jehun stared at it. Then slowly, he reached out. His small fingers touched the paper, tracing the figures. That's us, Sarah said in Korean. Breathing together. You were very brave. I was scared of the rain. His voice was a whisper, rusty with disuse. I know rain can be scary when you're alone. But you're not alone now. She heard a sharp intake of breath. Myri stood in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears gleamed in her eyes. Sarah's own breath caught. She hadn't made him speak. She'd just given him a reason to want to. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Sarah arrived each afternoon, and she and Jehun created their own world on the floor of that den. Picture cards, sensory bottles filled with glitter and oil, simple songs in Korean. She learned his triggers: sudden sounds, unexpected touch, transitions without warning. She learned what soothed him: deep pressure, repetitive motions, the sound of her voice speaking his mother's language. She learned that he loved the color blue, that he hummed when he felt safe, that his smile, when it finally broke through, was like sunlight after a storm. Nabi, butterfly. He pointed at the picture card, his pronunciation careful. Maya Nabi, that's right, butterfly. Sarah clapped softly. Jehun is smart. His smile widened. Then he laughed, a small rusty sound that cut through the afternoon silence like a bell. Myri, passing by the doorway, stopped so abruptly she nearly stumbled. Her hand went to her mouth again, and Sarah saw tears streaming down her face. That sound, that laugh. It was the sound of life returning to a tomb. Daehoon observed from doorways. Sarah felt his presence before she saw him. That particular quality of silence that followed him like a shadow. He never interrupted, never spoke, just watched. Watched Jehun paint with traditional brushes, giggling when the ink splattered. Listened to Myri tell stories about their grandmother, her voice warm with memory. Then everything shattered. They were heading back to the car. Jehun chattering happily in Korean when Sarah caught the wrongness. A black sedan idling across the street, engine running. Two men in the museum entrance who'd been watching them too closely. Marcus sensed it a heartbeat later. Get in the car now. The crack of gunfire was a physical punch to Sarah's chest. Time fractured into brutal, crystalline moments. Marcus shoving her and Jehun behind the SUV. Myri screaming. The acrid smell of cordite and burning rubber. The sound of bullets punching through metal. Marcus returned fire, his movements efficient and deadly. The younger guards flanked them, weapons drawn, shouting into their radios. More shots. The sedan's windshield exploding. A man dropping to the pavement. Jehun was pressed against Sarah's chest, his hands over his ears, his whole body shaking. She covered him with her body, her own terror, a living thing clawing at her throat. Then Marcus had them moving, hustling them into the SUV as tires squealed and more gunfire erupted. The vehicle lurched forward, and Sarah caught a glimpse through the rear window. Two bodies on the pavement, Marcus's jaw set in grim satisfaction, the museum entrance now a war zone. They drove in silence. Jehun had gone completely nonverbal, rocking in Sarah's arms. Myri was pale as death, tears streaming down her face. Marcus spoke into his phone in low, urgent Korean. We're 3 minutes out. Secure the perimeter. Get Mr. Park on the line. The townhouse had transformed into a fortress. Men in suits lined the street, weapons visible. Every entrance was guarded. Daehoon stood in the foyer like a statue carved from rage. His phone pressed to his ear, his voice dropping commands like guillotine blades. When he saw them, his control cracked. He ended the call and crossed the space in 3 strides. His hands framing Sarah's face, his eyes wild. Are you hurt? No, we're okay. But Jehun wasn't okay. He'd retreated into himself, nonverbal and trembling. Daehoon scooped him up, carrying him upstairs while murmuring soft reassurances in Korean. Sarah sank onto the couch, her legs finally giving out. Marcus stood at attention, his face professionally blank despite the blood spattered on his shirt. Not his, she realized. Someone else's. They knew the route, Marcus said quietly when Daehoon returned. They knew exactly where we'd be and when. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daehoon's eyes scanned the room, calculating. Sweep the house. Every phone, every device, check everyone. His gaze landed on each person present, including Myri. Appa, you can't think. Her voice broke. I don't know what to think. But someone told the Jade Phoenix exactly where my family would be today. The temperature in the room dropped to Arctic, and I will find out who. The search took hours. Men systematically dismantled electronics, checked cars, interrogated staff. Soyoung submitted to questioning with quiet dignity. The guards were cleared one by one. Sarah sat with Jehun, holding him as he rocked, singing soft Korean lullabies until his breathing finally evened. When she emerged, the sun was setting and the house felt like a tomb. She found Myri in the kitchen alone, her face streaked with tears. The younger woman looked up when Sarah entered, and the guilt in her eyes was devastating. It was you. Sarah's voice came out hollow. Myri crumpled. I didn't. They said they just wanted to scare you off. That's all. Just frighten you enough to leave. The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. Korean and English mixing. I thought you were a distraction. Someone who'd get hurt or get him hurt. I thought I was protecting my family. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. You made a deal with the people who want him dead. They promised no one would get hurt. They said they'd stage something minor, and you'd leave, and everything would go back to normal. Myri's sobs were breaking raw, but then they tried to kill him. They used me to try to kill my brother. The betrayal was internal, intimate, not an enemy from outside, but family from within. Daehoon stood in the doorway. Sarah didn't know how long he'd been there, but the look on his face made her heart stop. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and grabbed Myri by the shoulders. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought he might hurt her. Instead, he just stared at his sister like she was a stranger. Get out. His voice was dead, empty. Pack your things. You have 1 hour. If you're still here after that, I'll have you removed. Appa, please. You put a target on Sarah, on Jahan, on me. You made a deal with the same kind of people who got our sister killed. Each word fell like a stone. You're not my family anymore. Myri collapsed, her sobs echoing through the house. Daehoon turned and walked away, his footsteps disappearing down the hall. Sarah stood frozen, torn between following him and staying with this broken woman who'd betrayed them all. In the end, she followed him. She found him in his study, standing at the window, his hands braced against the frame. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing controlled but audible. Daehoon, she was all I had left. His voice cracked. After our parents died, after our older sister was murdered, it was just Myri and Jahan and me. I trusted her with everything. I trusted her with you. The pain in his voice cut through her chest like a blade. Sarah moved closer, close enough to see the tremor in his hands. She'd never seen him vulnerable before, never seen the control crack this completely. You still have Jahan. And me. The words were out before she could stop them. A promise she hadn't meant to make. A commitment that scared her even as she spoke it. He turned, and the devastation in his eyes made her breath catch. Do I? Because everyone leaves eventually. Everyone finds an exit when things get too dark. And I'm about to get very dark, Sarah. The way he said her name, like it was something precious and fragile, made her step closer. I'm not leaving. You should. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. I'm going to hunt down everyone involved in today. I'm going to make them pay in ways that will give you nightmares. You should run while you still can. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them, her chin tilted up in defiance. So, yes, I'm staying, but don't mistake that for acceptance. I'll call you out when you're wrong. I'll fight you when you try to control too much, and I won't pretend that what you do is justifiable just because I care about your family. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his hand finally touched her face, his palm cupping her jaw, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish, maybe both. His lips found hers, and this kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper, weighted with the knowledge of what she was choosing, what she was accepting. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah's heart was still racing. But the terror had transformed into something else, something darker and more complicated. She'd chosen the cage and the monster inside it, and God help her. She wasn't sure she'd ever want to leave. The world outside the townhouse had shifted. Sarah felt it the moment she stepped onto the street. That prickle of awareness, the sense of being watched. The gilded cage she'd chosen had become a shield, and leaving it meant exposing herself to predators she was only beginning to understand. Marcus drove her everywhere now, to the small Korean market 3 blocks away, where she bought ingredients for Jahan's favorite snacks. To the library, where she checked out picture books in Hangul. Even the short walk from the car to the entrance felt orchestrated, controlled. Is this really necessary? She asked him one afternoon, watching him scan the street before opening her door. His expression was kind but immovable. Park doesn't take chances with what matters to him. The words settled in her chest, warm and terrifying. She'd become visible. Daehoon's woman, though they'd never discussed labels or definitions. In his world, the kiss had been a declaration, the choice to stay, a vow, and now she wore that visibility like a target. The first real threat came on a Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. Sarah was in the produce section selecting apples for Jahan. He'd eat them if she cut them into precise A's. No skin when she felt it. That particular quality of attention that made her skin crawl. A man stood too close. Mid-40s expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked up a melon, examining it with theatrical care while his gaze slid over her like oil. Beautiful day, he said in accented English. Mandarin, she thought. Or Cantonese. Sarah shifted away, her hand tightening on the shopping basket. Excuse me, you're Sarah Chun. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. You work for Park Dae-hoon, taking care of his nephew. Her blood iced. Marcus was 2 aisles over, checking the perimeter. She could scream, run, but her body had locked into place. I don't know what you're talking about. Jaehoon is a beautiful child. The beauty I have to be reminded of. Their eyes met. The air felt charged, dangerous. Soyoung's voice echoed from downstairs, calling them for dinner, and the spell broke. One evening, 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed. She'd stayed late, finishing a lesson plan for Jaehoon, and the house had fallen into its nighttime silence, a different quality of quiet than the daytime, heavier and more intimate. She was heating leftover jig when Dae-hoon appeared. He looked different, tired. The perfect control he wore like armor had slipped. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair disheveled. He'd been in his study, she realized, working until exhaustion finally won. Can't sleep? She asked. Never can. He moved to the counter, reaching for a bowl from the upper cabinet at the same moment she did. Their hands collided. The contact was electric, a spark that traveled up her arm and settled somewhere dangerous in her chest. Sarah yanked her hand back as if burned. Dae-hoon's fingers lingered on the bowl, his eyes fixed on her. You're afraid of me. I'm cautious around you. There's a difference. Is there? He set the bowl down slowly, his movements deliberate. Tell me, Sarah, what scares you more? What I do in the dark or the fact that you're still here despite knowing? The question was a blade, sharp and precise. I'm here for Jaehoon. Are you? Her heart hammered. He moved closer, not threatening, but the space between them shrank until she could feel the heat radiating from him, until his presence filled her senses. You're a terrible liar. And you're arrogant. Honest. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. I see you, Sarah. The way you watch me when you think I'm not looking. The way your breath catches when I'm near. You're terrified and fascinated in equal measure. You're imagining things. She should move. Should step back, maintain distance, remember who he was and what he did in the shadows. Instead, she tilted her chin up, defiant. What do you want from me? Everything. The word was a caress and a threat. But I'll settle for honesty. The steam from the forgotten pot rose between them, and the domesticity of the moment, standing in his kitchen in the dead of night, felt forbidden, transgressive. Sarah's lips parted. I don't know what I feel. That's more honest than most people give me. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the touch feather light, but searing. Her eyes fluttered closed. This was wrong, dangerous, a line that shouldn't be crossed. His lips met hers before thought could catch up to action. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or testing. It was collision, inevitability. Two people who'd been circling each other finally, giving into gravity. He tasted like whiskey and control, like power and something desperately, humanly vulnerable. Sarah's hands found his chest, felt his heartbeat thundering as wildly as hers. Instead, she rose and padded downstairs in bare feet. The house was empty except for 2 guards stationed outside. Soyoung had gone to her sister's for the night. Jaehoon was upstairs, finally sleeping after hours of Sarah holding him, singing, promising safety she couldn't guarantee. Sarah found herself in Marcus's security office. She didn't know what she was looking for. Comfort, maybe. Evidence that everything was under control. She found something else. It was tucked behind his desk, partially hidden by a loose baseboard. Small, black, high-tech. She recognized it from cop shows, from movies, a listening device, an FBI transmitter, if the tiny embossed letters were accurate. Sarah's hands shook as she held it. Marcus, the loyal one, the man who protected her, who'd saved them at the museum. He was a spy. How long? How much had he heard? How much had he reported? Her mind spun with implications. Marcus had been there for everything. Every conversation, every confession, every moment Dae-hoon had let his guard down. She could turn it in, tell Dae-hoon. Watch as his trusted lieutenant was torn apart, or her fingers tightened on the cold metal. This was her escape, her exit. She could take this device, walk out the door, find the nearest FBI field office, trade everything she knew for immunity, for safety, let the good guys take down the monster, go back to her normal life, her safe life, the life where she wasn't washing blood from a killer's hands. Daehoon's words echoed in her mind. She could leave. This was the sign, the universe offering her an out. Sarah stood there for an eternity, the device growing warm in her palm. She thought of Daehoon's kiss, tasting of whiskey and desperation. She thought of his sister's unfinished canvas. She thought of Jahun calling her sons and Meme with trust in his voice. She thought of Myri's betrayal, of the devastation on Daehoon's face when his sister shattered his world. She thought of the Jade Phoenix threatening a 5-year-old child. She thought of moral lines and impossible choices, and the fact that she'd stopped recognizing herself months ago. Her breath shuddered. Then she dropped the device on the floor. The small crunch of metal and circuits beneath her heel was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. The moral line wasn't just crossed. It was obliterated. She'd just destroyed federal evidence. She'd just become complicit in obstruction of justice. She'd just chosen the monster over the light. Sarah ground the device into electronic dust, then swept the pieces into the trash, covered them with paper towels, carried the whole bag outside to the bins. When she came back inside, her hands were steady. The choice was made. She was his now completely. No escape, no redemption, just this dark, impossible love and the family she'd chosen to protect. Dawn came soft and gray. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee. She didn't want. When she heard the vehicle's return, she knew before she saw him. Daehoon stood in the doorway, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, but something had shifted. The controlled violence he carried like a second skin had been satisfied. Federal. The Jade Phoenix won't be a problem anymore. His voice was matter-of-fact, reporting completion of a task. How many? She wasn't sure why she asked. Enough. He moved to the sink, began washing his hands with methodical precision. The water ran pink, then clear. You don't want details. No, she didn't. But she wanted to know that Jahun was safe, that the people who'd used Myri's guilt and grief to target a traumatized child would never hurt anyone again. Are we safe? We're safe. He dried his hands, turned to face her. The exhaustion lines around his eyes had deepened, but there was something else. Relief, maybe. Or peace. It's over. Sarah nodded. Poured coffee she didn't want into cups she wouldn't drink. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal after the night they'd both survived. After the choices they'd both made. Daehoon approached slowly, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't want space. She wanted his arms around her, wanted to feel alive after spending hours convinced she might lose everything. His embrace was gentle, careful, like he was afraid she might break. Or afraid she might finally run. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered against his chest. I know. But the way he held her suggested he was still learning to believe it. You've been living in danger. I can give you normal. I can give you safe. I want to stay with Yoma. Jahun's voice was getting stronger, more certain. And Samchan, Uncle, this is my home. The standoff held, tension crackling like electricity. The wedding guests had fallen silent. The guard stood ready. Daehoon and this government agent locked in a battle for a child's future. And Sarah, standing between them, realized their war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Daehoon's grip on her hand was like steel, his knuckles white. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet and lethal. You'll have to kill me before you take him. Detective Lee's expression hardened. That can be arranged. The wedding lights swayed in the evening breeze. Jahun pressed closer to Sarah, his small body shaking. The black diamond on her finger caught the light, beautiful and dark as the life she'd chosen. She'd washed the blood from a killer's hands. She'd destroyed evidence. She'd crossed every line. And now she'd fight the law itself to keep this family together. We're not giving him up, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. He stays with us. Detective Lee's eyes moved to her. This black woman in a wedding handbook. This outsider who'd somehow become the center of this criminal family. His expression was almost pitying. You married into this today. You don't understand what you've become part of. When the arrests come, and they will come, you'll go down with them. Then I go down. Her voice didn't waver. But he stays here. Daehoon's grip on her hand was like steel, his knuckles white with the force of it. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet and absolutely lethal. "You'll have to kill me before you take him." Detective Lee's expression hardened, the sympathetic mask falling away to reveal the steel beneath. "That can be arranged." The wedding lights swayed in the evening breeze, their glow suddenly sinister. Jehun pressed closer to Sarah, his small body shaking, his breath coming too fast. The black diamond on her finger caught the light, beautiful and dark as the life she'd chosen, the vows she'd just made. She'd crossed every line that had once defined her. And now she'd fight the law itself. Fight the man who claimed biology as his weapon to keep this family whole. Daehun's hand found her waist, pulling her and Jehun closer, creating a fortress with their bodies. His eyes never left Detective Lee's face, and Sarah recognized the look. She'd seen it that night when he'd left to eliminate the Jade Phoenix. Cold, calculating, absolutely merciless. "The courts will decide," Detective Lee said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Now he was a government agent facing a crime lord on his own territory, surrounded by armed men who would kill on command. "I have legal law." Daehun's voice cut through the garden like a blade. "You think law matters here. You think your papers and your government credentials will protect you if you try to take him. You're threatening an NIS agent. I'm protecting my family." The distinction in Daehun's voice was absolute. Law was a tool, family was sacred. One could be bent, broken, bought. The other was worth dying for. Detective Lee's hand moved toward his jacket. Yuna appeared behind him, her weapon drawn, the barrel pressed to the base of his skull. "I wouldn't." Her voice was silk over steel. "This garden is full of people who've killed for much less than what you're threatening." Detective Lee froze. Around them, the wedding guests who weren't really guests shifted positions. Weapons appeared from beneath formal wear. The garden had become a killing field, beautiful and deadly. Monitored visits, conditions, something that gives him stability, but lets me. He swallowed hard. "Lets me know my son." It wasn't surrender. It wasn't victory. It was the razor's edge between two impossible choices. Daehun's voice was cold steel. "You will never take him from this house. You will never be alone with him. And if you ever put him at risk again, I will end you." Badge or not. Detective Lee's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. The guards lowered their weapons. Yuna holstered her gun, but didn't relax. Jehun looked up at Sarah, his eyes huge and frightened. "Do I have to go?" "No, baby." She pulled him into her arms, her voice breaking finally. "You never have to go. This is your home forever." His arms wrapped around her neck, and he pressed his face into her shoulder, his small body shaking with relief. Daehun's hands settled on both of them, heavy and possessive and protective. His eyes met Detective Lee's across the garden, and the message was clear. "This is my family. Challenge that again, and law won't save you." The wedding was over. The celebration had died. But Sarah stood there in her midnight blue hanbok, holding the child who called her mother, feeling her husband's hand steady against her back, and knew one absolute truth. Their war wasn't over, but they would fight it together. The man, the monster, the woman who'd chosen darkness, and the child, they'd all die to protect forever. If this story pulled you into the shadows with me, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts below. Rest your heart for now because the next story goes even deeper. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes. 6 months had passed since the wedding that became a battlefield. 6 months since Detective Lee had walked away with his tail between his legs and a promise that felt more like a threat. 6 months of building something that looked almost normal from the outside. Almost. Sarah stood in the townhouse kitchen, watching Jehun practice his letters at the breakfast table, his small tongue poking out in concentration. The morning light caught the simple gold band on her finger, a replacement for the dramatic black diamond that now lived in a safe upstairs. They'd learned that subtlety served them better than statements. But the world had a way of reminding them that normal was an illusion they could never fully embrace. The first sign came in the form of a photograph slipped under their door. Sarah found it when she went to collect the morning paper. No envelope, no message, just a black and white image of Jehun walking to his therapy appointment the week before. Someone had been watching. Someone knew his schedule, his routines, the exact moment when he was most vulnerable. Her hands trembled as she carried it to Daehun's study. He stared at the photograph for a long moment, his face carved from stone. Then he picked up his phone and made a series of calls in rapid Korean. Within minutes, the house had transformed back into the fortress it had been 6 months ago. Armed men appeared at every entrance. Cars with tinted windows took up positions on the street. The illusion of normal life evaporated like morning mist. "We need to leave the city," Marcus said during the emergency meeting that afternoon. "There are safe houses in the mountains, places where we can control every approach." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. For 6 months, they'd been building a life here. Jehun had been making progress, laughing more, speaking in full sentences. The thought of uprooting him again, of running, made her feel sick. "No," Daehun's voice cut through the discussion. "We don't run. Running means they've won, means they've driven us from our home. We find out who sent this, and we eliminate the threat. Permanently." The investigation took 3 days. 3 days of increased security, of canceled appointments, of Jehun asking why he couldn't go to the park anymore. 3 days of Sarah watching the light in his eyes dim as the walls of their careful world closed in around them again. On the 4th day, Marcus brought them answers. "It's not the Jade Phoenix," he said, spreading photographs across Daehun's desk. "They're finished. This is something new. Someone calling themselves the Silver Serpent. They've been asking questions about Jehun, about his routine, about you." His eyes met Sarah's. "They know exactly who you are and what you mean to this family." Sarah studied the surveillance photos. Men in expensive suits, women with predatory smiles, all of them watching from the shadows. It was like looking at a reflection of Daehun's own organization, but twisted somehow. Hungrier. More desperate. "What do they want?" she asked. "Leverage," Daehun said simply. "They think they can use Jehun to control me. Use you to break me. They're about to learn how wrong they are." That night, Sarah found herself standing in Jehun's doorway, watching him sleep. He looked so small in the big bed, his face peaceful in a way that seemed impossible given the dangers circling their family. She thought about the choice she'd made 6 months ago, the decision to stay, to fight, to become part of this world. Now that choice was being tested again. "You're thinking about leaving," Daehun's voice came from behind her. It wasn't a question. She felt him move closer, his presence solid and warm at her back. "The thought crossed my mind," she admitted. "Not leaving you. Never that. But maybe taking Jehun somewhere safe while you handle this." "There is no safe, not from people like this." His hand found her shoulder, gentle but firm. "They'll follow you wherever you go. The only safe is through them. Through the threat. Through the blood." Sarah turned to face him. The light from the hallway caught the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of constant vigilance that never fully left him. "You're tired," she said softly. "When was the last time you slept a full night? When was the last time any of us did?" His smile was rueful. "This is the price, Sarah. This is what protecting our family looks like. Constant vigilance. Constant readiness to fight. Are you still willing to pay it?" She thought of Jehun's laugh, of the way he called her Iyama now without hesitation, of the life they'd built in the spaces between danger. "Yes," she said, "but I want to do more than just survive this. I want us to win." Daehun's expression shifted, something predatory sliding behind his eyes. "Then we plan. Together. No more protecting you from the ugly realities. If you're going to be part of this family, truly part of it, then you need to understand what that means." The planning took place in the basement of the townhouse, in a room Sarah had never seen before. The walls were lined with maps, photographs, detailed surveillance reports. It looked like a war room, which, she supposed, it was. Daehun spread out the intelligence they'd gathered on the Silver Serpent, pointing to key locations, identifying targets. "They have 3 main operations in the city," he explained. "Drug distribution, human trafficking, and money laundering through a chain of restaurants. If we hit all 3 simultaneously, we can cripple them before they can retaliate." "What about their leadership?" Sarah asked, studying the photographs of stern-faced men and cold-eyed women. "Taking out the operations won't matter if the head of the snake survives." Daehun's smile was sharp as a blade. "Leave that to me. The Silver Serpent's leader is a woman named Vivian Chun. She thinks she's untouchable because she's never been directly connected to the violence. She's about to learn that there are different kinds of warfare." Sarah felt something shift inside her as she studied the plans, as she watched Daehun explain how they would dismantle their enemies piece by piece. 6 months ago, this would have horrified her. Now, thinking of Jehun sleeping upstairs, thinking of the photograph that had shattered their peace, she felt nothing but cold determination. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Daehoon looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected her to want an active role. "You don't have to," he started, but she cut him off. "Yes, I do. They threatened our son. They threatened our family. I'm not going to hide upstairs while you fight for us. Tell me what you need." The night of the operation, Sarah stood in the bathroom applying makeup with hands that didn't shake. She was wearing a black dress that Daehoon had chosen, elegant but unremarkable, the kind of outfit that would let her blend into the background of an upscale restaurant. Her role was simple: walk into the Silver Serpent's money-laundering front, order dinner, and wait. When the lights went out, when the chaos began, she was to identify Vivian Chun and mark her location for the extraction team. "It sounds too dangerous," Marcus had argued during the final briefing. "If something goes wrong, if you're recognized, they could use you against us." But Daehoon had been firm. Sarah was unknown to them, invisible in a way that his usual operatives couldn't be. And more than that, she'd insisted on being part of the solution instead of just another problem to be protected. The restaurant was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, understated, filled with people who probably had no idea they were eating dinner in the center of a criminal enterprise. Sarah ordered wine she didn't intend to drink and pasta she wouldn't touch, and waited. Vivian Chun arrived at 9:30, exactly as their intelligence had predicted. She was smaller than Sarah had expected, elegant in the way that money and power could make anyone elegant. But there was something cold in her eyes that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of Daehoon in his darkest moods. Sarah watched as Vivian moved through the restaurant, greeting certain diners with the practiced warmth of someone who knew how to play the social game. When she approached Sarah's table, extending a hand in introduction, Sarah felt her pulse spike. "I don't believe we've met," Vivian said, her English accented but precise. "I'm Vivian Chun. I make it my business to know all our regular customers." Sarah smiled, channeling every acting class she'd ever taken. "Jennifer Park. I'm new to the neighborhood. Someone recommended this place." Vivian's smile widened, but her eyes remained calculating. "Well, we're delighted to have you. I do hope you'll become a regular." The lights went out exactly at 10 o'clock. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing the restaurant in an eerie red glow. In the confusion that followed, Sarah slipped the small tracking device from her purse and attached it to the bottom of Vivian's chair as the woman stood in alarm. "What's happening?" Vivian demanded of the nearest server. Sarah was already moving toward the exit, blending into the crowd of confused diners. Behind her, she could hear Vivian's voice rising in anger and fear as she realized this wasn't just a power outage. By the time the emergency lighting revealed the truth, Sarah was long gone. The extraction happened 3 blocks away, in an alley that Daehoon's men had secured hours earlier. Sarah watched from the safety of an armored SUV as they brought Vivian Chun out of the restaurant, her hands zip-tied behind her back, her elegant composure finally cracked. She looked smaller now, older, just another criminal caught in a web of their own making. "Is it over?" Sarah asked as they drove through the quiet streets. Daehoon's hand found hers in the darkness. "This part is. There will be cleanup, loose ends to tie up, but the Silver Serpent is finished. Vivian Chun will disappear, and her organization will collapse without her." "What happens to her?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Justice," Daehoon said simply. "The kind that doesn't involve courts or lawyers or the possibility of appeal." Sarah nodded, surprised by how little that bothered her now. 6 months ago, the thought would have kept her awake at night. Now, thinking of Jahun safe in his bed, it felt like closure. They returned home to find Jahun still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the war that had been fought and won in his name. Sarah stood in his doorway again, but this time the weight on her shoulders felt different. Lighter somehow. The constant fear that had been their companion for months had lifted, replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Security. Come to bed," Daehoon said softly, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we can start planning our real future. Not just survival, but something better." Sarah let him lead her away from the doorway, away from the endless vigilance that had defined their lives. For the first time since she'd met him in that rain-soaked alley, she felt like they might actually get to be happy. The wedding planning began a month later. Not the quiet courthouse ceremony they'd had 6 months ago, surrounded by lawyers and the threat of Detective Lee's interference, but a real celebration. Jehun threw himself into the preparations with the enthusiasm of a child who'd never had a reason to celebrate before. He drew pictures of flowers and cakes, practiced walking down imaginary aisles, and asked endless questions about whether he could wear a special suit. "It will be perfect," Sarah assured him one afternoon as they worked on decorations in the townhouse's main dining room. The threats were gone. The silver serpent was history, and for the first time, they could plan something beautiful without looking over their shoulders. Jehun beamed at her, his smile bright and unguarded in a way that still took her breath away. "Iyama," he said carefully, "can we invite my old teachers from the special school? I want them to see that I'm okay now." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "Of course, baby. We'll invite everyone who matters to us." The ceremony took place in the townhouse's garden, the same space where Detective Lee had once threatened to tear their family apart. Now it was transformed with white flowers and silk ribbons, filled with the people who'd become their chosen family. Marcus stood as Daehun's best man, his usually stern face soft with genuine affection. Soyoung had prepared a feast that would have impressed royalty. Even some of Jehun's teachers from the special needs school had come, tears in their eyes as they watched their former student serve as ring-bearer with perfect precision. "Do you, Sarah-chun, take Park Daehun to be your husband?" the minister asked, "to love and protect, in light and in darkness, for as long as you both shall live?" Sarah looked into Daehun's eyes and saw their entire journey reflected there. The fear, the choices, the blood, the love, the impossible path that had led them to this moment. "I do," she said, and meant it with every part of her soul. The kiss that followed tasted like whiskey and promises, like a future that they'd fought to earn and finally deserved to claim. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the garden with Jehun in her arms. He was exhausted from the excitement, his small body heavy against her shoulder, but he was smiling even in his half-sleep. This is what we fought for, she thought. This moment, this peace, this child who could finally rest without nightmares. "What are you thinking about?" Daehun asked, coming up beside them. Sarah leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid presence of the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. "I'm thinking about how far we've all come, how much we've grown, how maybe, just maybe, we've earned the right to be this happy." Daehun's arms encircled both of them, creating a fortress of love and protection around their small family. "We've earned it," he agreed. "All of it. The peace, the love, the future where Jehun can grow up safe and loved and free to be exactly who he's meant to be." As if summoned by their words, Jehun stirred in Sarah's arms, blinking up at them with sleepy eyes. "Are we going to live happily ever after now?" he asked in Korean, his voice small and hopeful. Sarah exchanged a look with Daehun, seeing the same fierce determination in his eyes that she felt in her own heart. "Yes, baby," she answered. "We're going to live happily ever after." And they did. If this story captured your heart the way it captured mine, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which moment moved you most. Love always finds a way, even in the darkest places, and sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose for ourselves. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the most impossible circumstances into something beautiful.